Welcome to the Brother Bud podcast. Each week, you will hear sermons from Brother Bud. Brother Bud lived with wisdom, integrity, compassion, care, truth, and honesty. We hope you experience the grace of Jesus through listening to Brother Bud's words. Now, let's hop into today's sermon.
Got a young man came to see me this morning. His name's Douglas Carver, and known to some of you, if not many of you in this place. And he asked me if I would give him a few moments that he might be address this people, something that's a great concern to him. And I've granted him that permission, and I'm going to ask him if he will to come now. Douglas Carver.
Carver.
Carver. Douglas Carver. Bless you, Lord.
Well, the first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to ask the brother here to ask the Lord to speak to my heart, and that I might tell you and talk to you in the way that God would like me to speak to you, and what that He has laid on my heart to speak to the public, and not just to you, but to other people also as time goes on. I've not done this before, but God has spoke to my heart, and He's been doing this for the past year and a half in a way that He's never spoke before. And I would like to ask Brother Clements here if he would ask God to put the Spirit within me, that I would speak to you in a manner that you would get some understanding out of what that I'm going to say, and especially the young people of this church and the young people of this world. And that my message would go out, that you would talk to other people and children. It would do something to their hearts that would cause them to not fall in the same ditch that I have fell into. Brother Clements.
Father, as we stand in your presence right now, we pray for Douglas, and I ask you, Lord, that you'd have mercy upon him. I ask you, Lord, that you'd reach down and touch him with your Spirit. Lord, that you'd give him the words that you'd have come forth to touch each and every one of our hearts. Lord, he's troubled and he's burdened by you, and he wants to speak these things, and we ask, Lord, that you give him wisdom from on high. We ask, Lord, that everything that's said and done be said and done to the glory of your holy name, that Jesus would be high and lifted up. We all might look into him. Bless him as he stands now, Lord. Give him wisdom, lead him, guide him, and direct him, and I'll never fail to give you the praise. For it's in the precious name of your Son, Jesus, that I do pray and ask you for his sake.
Thank you, Lord. Well, first thing, if I was to tell you that I'm not nervous, I would be telling you that I would be telling you something that isn't true. If I was to tell you that I'm not burdened in my heart, that I would be telling you something that isn't true. I want you to bear with me, because I might cry a little bit. But after I get done crying, maybe that I can deliver my message that I have in my heart to the young people of this church, and not only to the young, because as we grow older, we still learn. There is still light for us to see. There is light on down the tunnel, and when we get to where that we can't see light on down the tunnel, there's something wrong with us. The number one thing, the biggest thing that there is, it's a four-letter word, and that is L-O-V-E. That is love. You know that love has seemed to be in this earth anymore, that there's not too much love going around anywhere to anybody. Because we have come to a place in this world that people are mostly out for gain. They're out for personal gain and houses and cars and stuff like this. But first thing I want to do, and I've written me some notes here so that I won't get off into a long conversation or a long speech that I know you people want to go home soon, but I want to get off of my heart what I've got on. In first place is I want to talk about myself. Ruth Carter here is my cousin, and she's known me all my life, and she remembers how it was when we was children in Tennessee, and how that we used to have homecomings, and we loved one another, and the family stuck together. And when trouble came with one, it was with all. It wasn't just one had the trouble by himself and all like this. Well, my mother, I remember when I was a child, she prayed many nights, and she would sit beside my bed when my father would be out drinking. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say anything against my father, because as I grew older, I wondered why that my father did some of the things that he did when I was a child. And believe it or not, I used to dread to see my father come home, because he would be drunk. And I would see him mistreat my mother. And for years and years, me and my mother was just as like this. If a woman was to say, or anyone was to say to my mother when I was a young man, you must be mistaken, Mrs. Carver. the first thing I would do when I was a young man, I would jump to her defense and I would say, listen, my mother's not a liar. And they would have to explain to me that she wasn't calling her a liar, that she was just mistaken. Well, as the years went on by and as I got older, there come a time in my life that I got to where that I thought that I knew more than my parent did. And you know what? If we look around today, Brother Clement, in the world today, that's exactly what's happening today. There is so many of us that realize we know more than our parents. My mother told me one time, and I'm not going to go into why she told me this, and I'm not going to go into what I said to her, and that's the only thing that I've ever said to her in my life, that my mother and I ever had any arguments about or ever had any harsh words with each other about it. My mother's dead. She died at the age of 58. My father's dead. My brother's dead. I've got one sister that she's my sister, but you know something? You can be a natural brother or you can be a natural sister, but that don't mean you're brothers and sisters. You got to be brothers and sisters in the Lord. You got to be brothers and sisters in the Spirit. You've got to have a spirit, I believe, that you reach out and have the same spirit as the other person and want to help the other person. It's take time out from our own affairs, and even no matter how busy that we are, that if we see a person over here in trouble and they need help like I'm needing now, and that's what I told Ruth this morning, we've got to take time out to help that person. And if we claim to be a child of God, that's what we've got to do. And I'll tell you what brought me to do this. I've got a daughter that is deaf and blind. She's 15 years old. I don't know if anybody of you has ever seen the movie Rocky or not. Have you? If you ever did, you'll know that in that movie that his eyes will swell so bad that they had to cut him open with a razor blade for him to see. I want to tell you that my daughter right now, and excuse me for walking around because I can't say anything unless I use my hands. I take that after my father. But last Saturday night, she's in a private nursing home. Up in Logansport, Indiana. It's called Camelot Care. Do you know what Camelot means? Love. I searched this country to find the best place that I could find for my daughter, and God blessed me in my lifetime. You know, there's blessings and there's curses. You can have blessings and then also have curses. When your mother or your father tells you one day when you're a young man and you stand up to her and you say something to her, young people, for goodness sakes, listen to me. For the sake of yourselves, listen to me. The Bible says you will reap what you sow.
That's right.
I did not understand one word of that when I was 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 35. I thought I did. But when I stood up to my mother one time and I told her something that I should not have said to her, she pointed her finger in my face. And you listen to me, children. She said, I want to tell you something, young man. She said, the day I never thought would come that you would stand in my face. She said, you know you had the best heart of any child I ever seen. You stayed with me when your dad was out doing things you shouldn't be doing, and you protected me when nobody else would. But she said, your heart has grown so hard that you have got the nerve to stand up in my face and tell me that that I'm wrong. She says, you are not God, and you don't know what's going to happen down the road. She says, you'll learn down the road when you get older. And thank God for one thing. I'm 56 years old, and I hope I have not learned all I will learn. And I'll tell you this, what I have learned, I didn't learn it the smart way. I had to learn it the hard way. Now you can learn, children. There's a fork in the road down here, and you're not to it yet. Because your parents are guiding you and leading you. And if that parent is standing and telling you what will happen down the road, and he's got enough wisdom that he has saw somebody else go down that road, and tells you not to head down that road, don't you head down it. If he's a good parent. I'm not saying all parents are good, brother. I'm just saying that this is the trouble with the juvenile delinquency now. There's no such thing as juvenile delinquency. There's parent delinquency. If there would not be parent delinquency, there would not be as much juvenile delinquency as it is. When I was home under my mother, I was not delinquent. It's when I got big enough that I thought I knew everything and more than my mother that I come a delinquent. And that's how come I wound up into the penitentiary when I was at the age of 17 years old. 6 years in Fort Pillow, Tennessee, and the walls of Nashville, Tennessee, and Brushy Mountain. And believe you me, back then prisons was prisons. It wasn't Sunday school. They're talking about building jails. If they would get the officials in offices that should be in office and start teaching our children the things they should do, they wouldn't have to be building new jails. They would have to be tearing down some of the jails they've got. Now, back to myself. But when my mother pointed her finger in my face and she said, I want to tell you something, young man. She said, you will reap 10 times what you sowed. 10 times. Usually they say 7. I wondered why she said 10. You know why? I've got 10 children. I've got 11. One of them's dead. I never reaped anything over that child. Now, isn't that strange? But you know something? I reaped every word that my mother said out of 10 of them. Number 1, I've reaped over the one that is deaf and blind, and right now her eyes, where she takes her hands and she beats herself like this so much that right today and last Sunday her eyes are swelled up, that her eyes she can't see, they're bigger than sticking out, and they are worse than that movie Rocky. I took last Sunday. Everybody don't know why that I'm the only one she's never bit. She'll bite anybody or anything. She'll fight anybody or anything but me. They don't understand why that I'm the only one that she does not fight and will not bite. And that I'm the only one that can speak to her, and I'm the only one that can talk to her. Now she's deaf. She's born this way. She's deaf. She's blind. She has seizures. She's self-destructive. You name it. You name it. And that's what's wrong with that child. Do you think that ain't the greatest reaping I've ever done in my life? That's not even the half of it. I've got 9 more children that I've got one that's 30. Jimmy, well, I'll start with the first one. Joyce is 40 years old, and today she doesn't speak to me. Hasn't spoke to me for 4 years. I've got one that's 34 years old that hasn't spoke to me for 4 years. I've got 2 that, now I was married twice. And that was the first greatest mistake I ever made in my life. It's my mistake, and I don't want nobody to think that I'm trying to uphold for myself, because I brought this on myself. Nobody else brought it on me. I brought it on myself. And that's why I'm here today, is I'm trying to get the young people of this world and the young parents of this world to realize this. Don't bring on yourself what I brought on myself. When your parent tells you that they've been down this road and the bridge is out down here, don't you be so ignorant when you get to the forks of that road. Say, well, my mother and dad don't know what they're talking about. And go on down here and fall off into the same hole they fell off into. My daughter Amy last Saturday night, Sunday night, or Friday night, they called me. She has gone into getting so bad that they called me in the middle of the night at 12 o'clock. They said, Mr. Carver said, we cannot handle this girl. Said she's stronger than any 5 men. Said we don't know what to do with her. Said we've got her doped so heavy that we don't know what to do with her without just putting her to sleep. Putting her out of her misery, just putting her to sleep. They said, would you come up here? I said, yes. They don't understand why that she will be sitting in a building. And when I come into the building and she has nothing to do with nobody and shows no sign of knowing anybody, but when I will get ready to leave and go down the hall, she'll pull away from him and reach back like this at me. They don't understand. When I went up to the psychiatric clinic the other day, they called me up there and asked me, did I know of anything that they could give her to keep her calmed down? I said, yes. I said, yes. I said, it ain't a medicine. I said, I'll tell you what it is. I said, it's because that I've got some brothers or some daughters and children, and this is why they don't speak to me. Because one of my children by my first wife, every one of those girls was pregnant and had children before they was married. Because my wife took the children when we got a divorce. I'm not going to put the blame on my first wife. The biggest part of it was mine. And I'll take the blame. Because had I done the things I should have done when I was a young man, but you know what? I was doing all I knew how to do. I thought I was. My father didn't set me down, and he didn't take enough time to set me down, and he didn't learn himself enough and get enough wisdom himself to where that he could set me down as I grew older and talk to me like that I am talking to you children today, and like that I should have took the time to do to my children, but I didn't do it. So my daughters don't like me and don't speak to me by my first wife because I finally decided this. I paid $110 a week support for 11 years and never missed a payment. My last daughter, that when the others was gone and I found out that she was pregnant at the age of 13 years old and getting ready to have a baby and was out running and ripping and romping the streets at night, and they sent out that I was going to have to pay more support, I decided one thing. I'm going to do something to help this child. I ain't going to do something to help my pocketbook. And I ain't going to just pay the support because I've got the money and I'm going to just go on about my way. I decided I'm going to try to help this child. You know what? I was right down in the court in Nashville, Indiana, and them crooked lawyers, and I'm telling you, they're crooked. They get down there and the judge and the lawyer gets their head together and they decide this. Rather than that woman let me have that child and raise her like I had the children that I'd raised after I got old enough to raise them, and I raised 2 daughters and they said it couldn't be done, and I raised them and I sent them to college. They got good educations. I seen to it they was not on the streets at night. They was at home as soon as that bus got in front of the door, and in 5 minutes they wasn't there. I wanted to know where they was at. There ain't none of them went out with no boys. They dated no boys at all, period, until it was 16. And when they did, the boy come to the house and he would sit at the table and eat. But he didn't do like they do today, run off in the bedrooms and just go anywhere they want to together. And everybody says, you can't do that nowadays. I said, you watch me. And I raised those girls until I got them out of my household. And when I seen to it, and I seen that the men that they married was, I thought, responsible men. They had good jobs and they had good families and everything like this. And I raised them girls to where that, like I feel like that a child ought to be raised. But even in then, the best you know how to do, a child will still go astray. There's children that'll go astray. But I stood up one time, and when I told my mother that I knew better than she did, and be very careful, children. When your mother or your parent, I don't care if you're 16, 17, 18, 19, 25, or 35, your parents usually can still tell you some things that you don't know yourself. And I want to stand up here, and I've done it in the spirit, and I've done it in every way I want to, and I would give anything in this world, anything. I would give everything I own. If my mother could sit right here and let me apologize to her, I would not make that mistake again. But I believe that even after my mother died, that my mother's spirit walked with me. I believe that she helped me and she gave me the knowledge to do one thing. I've got a 6th grade education. That's how far I went to school. And I don't want to be patting myself on the back, and don't you think I am, and Ruth will tell you this. I built Denny's restaurants, Red Lobsters, Dutch pantries. I built Kmart's, and I can build a house. I do the heating and the air conditioning and the plumbing, and there is nothing on a building that I cannot do. God had to give me that wisdom. It didn't come from education. He had to give me the knowledge and the understanding how to do this. And if you will have a heart after you've done something wrong, to not be ashamed to stand up into the public eye and not try to put the blame on somebody else and say, look, do you know when you point your finger at somebody, you got 3 pointing back at yourself? And that's what I should have learned a long time ago. And I wouldn't have to be standing up here today of telling you how sorry I am the way that I had done my mother just because that I stood in her face one time. I never did mistreat my mother. In fact, when my mother was dying, she depended on me to come and get her and take her to hospitals and to see to it a lot of things that she did. I was driving a semi at that time on the road. I drove a semi for years and I'd be gone. When my mother died, the night that she died, I was in Louisville, Kentucky, and I had to go to South Bend, Indiana. I had a breakdown halfway between Louisville or Indianapolis and South Bend, Indiana, almost up to Logansport. And I was sitting on the side of the road waiting for them to come out and fix the flat tire. There's a graveyard over there. And they had told me that night when I got to South Bend or Indianapolis, going through Indianapolis, that my mother was really took bad. She had took bad. So I had to go on to South Bend because I had that load, and I thought my job was more important than my mother, because I thought, well, she's not going to die tonight. But you know what? I went on to South Bend, and I sat there on the side of that road, and it fixed me up with enough hours to where that I couldn't drive back. They wouldn't let me because I would have had too many hours on the logbook. Well, when I hit the clock in South Bend, Indiana, when I got up that day, and I hit that clock in that clock, it was just like a voice spoke to me and told me my mother died. And you know something? That time card till this day has got the same time on it that my mother died. Because when that bell rung, something told me my mother was dead. I never got to see my mother alive no more. No more. But God has blessed me in natural things of this life. But you can have all the money you want in this world. You can go down and you can buy you some new Cadillacs, and you can buy you some new convertibles, and you can buy you 4 or 5 houses, and you can build yourself some nice homes. But I want to tell you something. If you do not honor your father and mother, you will be the most miserablest person in this world. And I don't expect me getting up here talking to you and telling you how sorry and apologizing that I ever did this to my mother. And I'll tell you why I picked this church. Because my mother was a General Baptist. And I went into the General Baptist Church one time, and I stood up and made a testimony. And I thought that just because that I learned a little bit more about the Bible than some of them does, is because there's a lot of people that study the Bible, but they don't study it enough. We all need to study more. Do you agree, brother? And if I say anything that you do not agree with, like I told you before, because I'm not here to condemn, and I'm not here to justify. That's not my job. I only can do one thing. I've got a heart here. I don't know that you serve the same kind of God I do. I don't know how you serve Him. That's up to you, because we're all a different vessel with God. We've all got a different purpose in life. We all have houses that look different. We all drive cars that look different, because that's the way we are. It's a shame. It'd be a shame if we all wanted to do the same job, and it'd be a shame if we all wanted to drive the same kind of car and wear the same kind of clothes. So we're all working for the same end, same purpose. And I've realized that. I have studied the Scriptures. I'll tell you this, I went into Pentecost, Apostolic Pentecost. And I know that when I tell you that you know how the Pentecost are, and God bless them. And I told a man this morning that's been my best friend for 35 years. I said, Raymond, you're not there yet. There is light still down the tunnel. And I hope at 56 I'm going to find me some more light as I walk down the road. I'm finding light right now to be able to stand up here and tell you people what I'm telling you now, because I wouldn't have done this. Why, if you'd asked me to have done this 25 years ago, I wouldn't have done it. I would not have done it, let alone come and ask the brother to let me do it. But you know what? I can see my mother when I lay at night. I can see the kitchen. I can see the sink. I can see my daughters at the age they were. I can see that house as if I was standing right in it. And I can see my mother's finger pointed in my face and says, son, you'll reap what you sowing. And that's the one scripture in that Bible that you better listen to. And I don't know if there's any of you, the rest of you in here that knows what I'm talking about or not, but I think that you do, because I think that all of us has had our problems. And I think that when our mother, our father tells us, son, now I've been down this road, and I went down here and I didn't know, nobody told me, and I fell off in this ditch. But I had to get out the best way I could. Now here's the fork in the road. You take this road here. Don't you go down that one. And if I'm so hard-headed like I was, and believe you me, I come from a family. My mother, you inherit, I believe, two parts. You've got one part of one side of your family and one part of the other side of your family. It's a heritage. You will have some traits of your father. You'll have some things of your mother. I thank God for one thing, and don't get me wrong, I love my dad beyond anything. When my dad died, the man he lived with told me he only knew he had. When I told him, I said, I don't want nothing in here because I don't want to have to look at it. I said, but if anybody you know can use it, they can have it. I says, I'll talk to my brother and my sister, and if they don't want it. He says, your brother and your sister? I said, yes. He said, well, Jimmy, I didn't even know you had a brother and sister. Said, Henry's lived here for 3 years. Did any of you know my dad, Henry Carver? So he said, I didn't even know you had a brother and sister. He said, I've never heard your dad speak of any child he's got except you since he's lived with me. You know why? Because I had learned by this time, because my mother had died. And I would come to my father, and he was on Social Security, and I'd give him $100 or $50 or whatever I wanted to give him. And I'd have people tell me, Jimmy, don't do that because he's doing this with it and doing that with it. I said, I don't care what he does with it. I didn't put a string on it to where when he puts it in his pocket, if he don't do what I want him to do with it, I can jerk it out of his pocket. I learned to honor my father and mother when it was too late. Too late. There comes a time in your life that is too late. And for God's sake, children, don't let it be too late to honor your father and mother. And you know, a lot of people, this gentleman this morning told me, he said, well, I steal this and I steal that. And I read him a scripture in the Bible, and I'll tell you what, it's in Proverbs, and there's some scriptures in Proverbs that you might want to open your Bible to it so that you'll know that I'm telling you what it is. Proverbs 8:11 says, for wisdom is better than rubies, and all things that may be desired are not to be compared to it. In other words, you can desire all the things in this world, your new cars, and you might sit around and you might think, well, I don't have enough money to do this, and things are hard and things are rough. But I'll tell you this much, there's something in this world a lot rougher than not having money, not having a fine house, and not having a fine car. Because I was raised to where we didn't have nothing but horses and buggies. And when we would travel, it would take us a long time to do it because they didn't have the modern things they've got today. And wisdom is one of the best things that you can search after, because once you get some wisdom and you learn wisdom, then you can learn how to cope with life a little bit better. 21st verse says that I may cause those that love to inherit substance, and I will fill their treasures. If you will get wisdom, and you will get love. Love is loving one another. Love is not my one daughter that ain't got no use for me, won't speak to me. It's because I told her this. I said, Kimberly, you know my brother laid down here and died. I kept him for 3 months. I changed his clothes. He was dying with cancer. I washed him. I took care of him. I was building a house that I'm going to live. Well, I don't live in it now. My daughters are living in one of them. But I built that house to where that my brother would be laying in one room of it. I'd sold the big house I'd just built, and I'd put him in a room, and I would put the drywall up in this ceiling, and I would put up a bed, and I would move him from that bed to this bed. Him was telling me he didn't want to go to no hospital. He didn't want to die in no hospital. And I'd move him to that bed, and when I'd get that room drywalled in there, I'd move him back to the other one, and I did that time after time. Not one of my daughters, that every time they saw me, what they would do is they'd run up and they'd put their arm around my neck and tell me how much they loved me. So one day, I told them this. I said, how come you haven't been to see your sister for over a year? This little girl that's deaf and blind, self-destructive. They wonder why that I can handle her. Do you know that there is a spirit within you that even a dog knows? Huh? Why? There's a spirit within you that even a dog knows. And I said, you let me tell you something. Children know it. I've never seen a child in my life I can't get along with. Not one. It's the grown-ups that you have the hard times with. Huh? Am I right? Now, they asked me, how do you control her like this? They didn't understand when they called me up to the hospital and they had 4 psychiatrists standing down at the end of the hall and didn't even let them know that they knew I was a-coming. They were standing down there with their books and all, and like they were talking. Amy was sitting down the hall about halfway. They had her down there trying to get her settled down, and 2 RNs are trying to settle her down. And when I came into the building, I asked the lady, I said, is there a little girl here by the name of Amy Carver from Camelot Care? Says, yes, they're down this way, turn to the left, down the hall, they're waiting on you. As I went down the hall and as I turned the corner, Amy sat down and she is doing this number. They didn't understand. I didn't know they were watching. They had made it up with those RNs because those RNs had told her some of the things that she'd done when she was around me that are those big-time doctors, those psychiatrists, that they did not believe because they had given her so much medicine and Thorazine and all and trying to calm her down and they couldn't. So they sat there and they watched me, and of course, the closer I got to, the more she come wheeling that little hand. And I went up and the RN got up and I sat down right beside her and she just took her feet and she put them up and under her and sat down on them and put her hand in mine, and I reached over and I kissed her on the neck and I kissed her in the ear. And I said, why are you mistreating my baby? Why are you whipping my baby like this? Don't be doing this to my child.
No.
Anyway, a few minutes here, they come up the hall after watching us. They walked up there and they leant back against the wall and said, Mr. Carver, we're doctor this and doctor this and doctor this. This is Dr. So-and-so. They wanted to know how I communicate with her like that. I said, I really can't explain it to you because you wouldn't understand. It takes a special spirit in you to know how to do that. It's not you knowing how to do it, but a right kind of a spirit can do it. Anyway, they took me in the office and they talked to me and they asked me what did I expect out of him and all like this. And I said, I don't expect nothing. I said, I tell you what I do expect. I said, you know my daughters, because I told them this. I said, my daughter, Amy, is deaf and she's blind and she's self-destructive and she has seizures. But one thing they don't understand, that she has feelings. They can be in the worst shape there ever was and they still got a heart and they still got feelings. My daughters do not go see my little girl, their own little sister. Didn't go for over a year. My son hasn't been for over a year. And finally I told them this. I said, let me tell you something, children. If your kind of love is the kind of love that will let your father sit down here and take care of his brother by himself when he himself has just had 2 back operations. I've had 2 discs taken out of my back and 3 broken bones. And I'm still going. But they wouldn't even come down and offer to clean my house. I've not had one person ever offer to come down and take care and help me with my brother, not one. Not the Christian that lives up in front of me. He's a man of God. He is a man that is a pastor of a church. Not one time did either one of them ever offer to come down and help me. I was sitting in South Bend last week and I went and got Amy and I took her out for a ride and they can't even get her in a school bus to take her over to the school. They can't even get her in a bus without having to put restraints on her to get her to the hospital. And I went in up there last Saturday morning. I left here at 12 o'clock in the night, couldn't sleep. I knew that my little girl was having trouble and I got up and I drove to South Bend. Or up to Logansport, And when I got there, I walked in the door and they asked me why I was there. I said, I knew that Amy was in trouble. And they said, yes, she's just got done beating herself again. So I went back there and when morning come, I got up and I got her in the car or in the truck and I drove her for about 50 miles. Well, I didn't use as good a judgment as I should have because I hadn't been taking care of Amy myself and I didn't know some of the things that happens to her, but she wears diapers. And when she had wet herself, and that longer ride sitting in that pickup truck with those leather seats and her wet, well, I guess she started itching. Well, we'd got right on back to the nursing home within a half a mile. And she started trying to pull her pants down and standing up in the truck and everything. I thought, well, she's tired of riding, and I'll just get out and I'll let her rest a little bit and walk around a little bit. I got her out of the truck, and when I got her out of the truck, I walked her around a little bit, and I thought, well, this is what she wants. But when I took her back to that truck to try to get her in, she'd just fall down on the ground and start beating her head. She beats her head, and one time she had a knot on it that measured 6 inches in diameter. Said they'd never seen such a knot on a kid's head. And I tried to get her back in the truck, and she'd just fall down by the truck, and she'd lay there and beat her head against the thing, and I'd have to get on top of her. Now, here I am, a grown man, and this is what I'm trying to do here, is to try to get the people of this world to have more compassion and get involved with more things instead of thinking, well, long as it don't bother me, why should I worry about somebody? You know what? It was about 9:30 on a Sunday morning. I'm as close to the highway as that bench right there. My truck's sitting there with the door wide open. And here I've got a girl out there as big, I guess, as this lady here in the green dress. She's just about the size of you now. Strong as a nox. And I would get down on top of her and try to hold her and hold her head and talk in her ear to keep her from biting herself and beating herself in the eyes because she was a wanting in her bed. She feels secure in that bed. She was tired. I used some poor judgment by carrying her that far, and I told him that I did. Next time, if I'd have took someone with me that could have helped me change her diaper, she'd have been all right. Because I would not change it because she's 15 years old and she's my daughter. And I cannot do it. So what I did is I had her down, and here's cars are going down the road, brother, going to church. They just look at me and drive right on by, and drive right on by, and drive right on by. And I thought, my God, here is a grown man out in the parking lot right next to the street with a woman down, or it looks like a woman, and down on top of her, and her beating and the banging and the carrying on. I could have had somebody down and killing them. They didn't know. Just kept on going. Finally, here come an old guy down the road in an old beat-up car. Had his window down, and I hollered at him. And I said, hey, would you please come here a minute? He turned around, and he come around, and I finally got Amy up, and we walked over to close to the car. And when he seen her, way she was, he liked to faint it. I said, would you please go to a phone and call Camelot Care and ask them if they could get somebody out here to help me with this child to get her back to the care center. He said, I don't have the money. I reached in my pocket and I just handed in my pocket a handful of change. He said, I'd have to go all the way home, and said, that's across town. He got the money and he went and he called for me, and they come. And I thought this. I thought, it's a shame. And this is happening, and it's not just in one church. It's in all churches. It's the people that are loving God. And the love of God is in the heart of anyone that will let God work in it. And my daughter, I know that the love of God is in her heart because she's never done anything wrong. She was born this way. But it just put a burden on me to this, that there needs to be, and I don't know how any of you feel about black people, but here's the thing of it is, Moses he was given a burden by God to carry his people out of the wilderness. The Hebrew children was delivered by some man that God had ordained to do it. I don't know what you think about blacks, but I've done work for blacks all over this country. And I as soon to do work for a black man as any white man. Because if there's good and bad in all, there's good and there's just and there's unjust in all. I don't care what color we are. I just as soon to do work for a black man to expect him to be paid right up front as anybody. But Martin Luther King, when he first came in, I was born in the South, and some of the things he done, I thought that he's just trying to make the black man better than the white man. But I realized one thing. I don't know what he was with God. I don't know what his faith was. I don't care nothing about that. But I do know this. I know that he saw a vision. And he saw that his children were under bondage. His people was under bondage. And one day when God spoke to him, I don't know, something had to speak to him if you look at his life. And something, I think sometimes he wanted money. Money. You think that? I don't know if it was or not. I'll tell you something. I don't want no money. God has put me in a position that I will not do nothing. If I run an organization right now, I'll not take a penny off of nobody for it. I want to do something to help the people. And if we don't get a Martin Luther King, and I'm talking to you about our government, and you can see what's going on, that my granddaughter was sitting the other day, brother, and she was reading a book so her mother and father could hear. And it says, if you even feel like that you're being abused at home, don't you be afraid to tell someone, because we are behind you. You know what they want to do today in the schools? When your daughter or your son comes home from school, you're supposed to let her go to the refrigerator and get her anything she wants, or him, either one, and come and plop down in front of a television and sit there and eat and gorge. And then when you tell them 15 times to get up and take out the trash, and after you've told them 15 times, if they don't get up and do it, and you happen to reach down and get them and swat them across the rear, they run to school and say you've abused them. Yeah. They're taking the control out of the home for the children. They're fixing it to where we'll not have no control over our children. And we are going to have to do something about it. And you know something? This world used to be controlled by the Protestant faith. And that's when the world was so much better off. But now it is controlled by the Jews and Catholics, people that are a natural organization. We are Gentiles. I am. I think most of you in here are. And if we as Gentiles don't get our heads together and in the churches and start wanting to get together and do something with our government to get things right for our children and for ourselves, and we don't get a leader that'll help us to do this and to understand what's happening to us, your children are going to be in the same shape that I was in. And I want to thank you all for your time, and I feel like that I have lifted a burden off of my heart so much, because I feel like that I've done what I should have done. And I want to say this in closing of what I'm going to say. Mother, I am so sorry. I am so sorry that I did ever stand in your face and try to tell you that I knew more than you did. And that's what I want to say. And God bless all of you, and thank you for your time. Thank you, brother.
Surely had a need to do what he did, because of that which he did many, many years ago. What you sow, that so also shall you reap. The Lord has been blessing us here in many ways, and I'm thankful for us being able to have the opportunity to let him stand and do what he felt he needed to do to try to bring peace into his heart and to his mind, to his soul, maybe to his family. But I'm thankful for what the Lord has been doing here. We had a young man got saved last Wednesday night, and we've had a number that have gotten saved recently and have been on the altar, and I'm thankful for what he's doing in this place. But I spoke to him before the service, and I asked him how he felt about joining the church, and he said he wanted to join, so I'm going to open the doors of the church. It's not all that late, and I'm going to ask if we come and sing a good song, have some musicians up here. I'm going to open the doors of the church at this time, that not only he, but if you're here and you would like to join this church, come into this fellowship, if you just come and present yourself before this body, you come at this time. And after they come, then we'll have a song. Okay? Bless your heart, Brother Bob. It's heart, man. Yeah. I'm just answering. Brother Bob Horton, he was here Wednesday night, and the Lord got a hold of him. He's been dealing with him for some time, and I've been aware of it, thankful for it. He's been dealing with his heart, and Wednesday night he was here, and he gave his heart and his life to Christ. And I'm going to ask you, brother, that at one time you felt lost and undone without Christ as your Savior.
Yes, I did.
Do you feel He came into your heart and saved your soul?
That is so.
You have a desire to join with this church.
I do.
Do I have a motion that we accept him into the Church Care and Fellowship?
Brother Moderator, I make a motion that we accept him.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Would all those in favor of this motion vote yes by rising to your feet? All those opposed by the same sign? Motion's carried. Let's all rise to our feet. Let's sing Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Let's have a right hand of fellowship. You just stand right here, brother. Bless you. Love you.
His praise.